Alright, welcome to COT TV. We're going to do a series of videos called Gear of Thieves, try not to infringe any acronym copyrights in the process. It was one of the questions that we get asked a lot when people talk to us, when other bands talk to us, and when we talk to people after shows and stuff like that. Is people asking us about our sounds, specifically kind of bass and guitar sounds and stuff like that, and how we do it. So what we thought we'd do is we run down all the equipment that we would use on stage and just talk through any modifications we make to the instruments and stuff like that, and just completely go into no holds barred rundown of how we get our sound. So first thing that I would say is one of the key things me and Ben will always tell anybody is that the majority of your sound is in these, and everyone's different, everyone sounds different. The amount of people I've had come up to me and say that they've tried Thunderbirds, they've tried Les Paul basses, and they've tried certain rigs and stuff like that just don't work for them, or they can't get a sound. It's just one of those things. Like, I've always managed to get a sound out of Gibsons. I just kind of get on with them, and I don't doubt the majority of that's in how I play or what I'm playing or whatever. But you know, you can hand this entire rig to somebody else and they play it and they make it sound completely different. But I will go through everything that I've got here. And this is pretty much it. I don't use anything else except what you can see in front of you here. So my rig, so my amp and my cab, they've evolved over the years. If you see videos and photos of me back in four-wheel drive days, you'll see me with a big old Ampeg stack. I've still got the Ampeg here next door in our studio room over there, and I still have it. But the reality was, it was so unreliable. Like, especially the way we deal with equipment, it would get broken. I spent as much fixing it over the years as I ever spent buying it, and it just became too unreliable. And so what happened was, I had this whole stack. I had a 4x10 and a 1x15, and I blew the whole lot, everything. Ampeg cabs, everything. I just blew them up. So the first evolution to my gear was to buy this cab here, the David Eden 4x10. Now they don't make these anymore, and I will play gigs where I'll have this rig on stage and people will try and just buy the cab off me there and then because they can't get hold of them. And I'd say there's probably about 50% of my overall sound now is because of this cab, and the speakers that are in it just sounds amazing. I rented it a couple of times while my cabs were being fixed and stuff like that, and eventually I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to buy it. So I got a really good deal on it, and it's a massive part of my sound, which you'll hear in a minute. It's heavy. It is so heavy, and we live on the second floor, so every time I have to do a gig I have to get it down 3 flights of stairs and back up again afterwards, which is painful, but it's a lot heavier than it looks. On the top here is a Marshall MB450 bass head. Now these are actually surprisingly like budget heads. Like, this didn't cost more than 200, I think it was 250 pounds, compared to my Ampeg SVT head, which cost, I think, like 2,500, like brand new just for the amp, right? And this was 250 quid. And was one of the best things I've ever bought, and it completely changed the sound at how I played straight away. It's got a couple of features that you just don't need and I don't use, so I'll just walk you through what I do. So basically it's got a modern setting and a classic setting, and I just ignore the modern one because it sounds awful. So what you have here is this: if we ignore the whole left hand side, there's this button here you push in, so you're on the classic, and I literally just use these 5 knobs, these 6 knobs here, and then the master volume, which is over here. So it's really straightforward. What I do is, it has a little preamp valve in it. I think it's like an EL34 or an EV34, so you can get like good valve gain on it. But what's great about it is you actually get it at really low volume because it's just one tiny preamp valve. So you have, this is literally how I set my rig up. We have our gain, we turn that all the way up. There's a boost button here for extra distortion, but I don't use it because it feeds back really badly if you push that button with the gain flat out. Then we have channel volume. Again, crank that all the way up. I don't know why they put a knob there, they should have just fixed it so that it was loud. Then we have a slightly unstandard tone controls. Bass here, I usually keep around 3 o'clock. Then there's this thing here called voice shift, but it's basically like a mid control, like mid-tone control. I keep it over on the third setting over here because it gives that kind of snarl that I want to be able to cut through all the cymbals and the guitars and everything else. And then this is the shape for the mid, so whichever mid selection you have here, this is the shape for that. I keep that about 2 o'clock, again just enough to make it sort of snarl and not enough to make it honk too badly. And then treble, depending on my strings, which I'll go through the guitars in a minute, but I tend to keep it between sort of 2 o'clock, and depending how dead my strings are, it might come all the way down to about 5 o'clock or so down there. But at the minute, last gig, it was up there, so my strings obviously aren't too bad. Ignore these two, I don't use them. And then this is the master volume over here. At a gig, I probably have it somewhere around 2 or 3 o'clock. And I tend not to really push it any harder than that. Anything else, it'll just go through the front of house. So that's literally it, like 6 knobs on the controls there, and then my master volume. And that's literally, I use no pedals. I get enough gain from that I can do pretty much all the sounds that I want for City of Thieves live stuff. Now, my basses are probably the other 50% of my sound. So I'll go through what I use them for, why I got them, and there's a couple of modifications I've got on them that I'll talk through as well. This is my main one. So this is a standard Gibson Thunderbird that me and Ben, and we drove round, we spent about a week looking on the internet for anywhere that had one in, and then we ended up driving down to Poole in Dorset because there was one shop that had this bass for sale, and the fact that it was black was just an added bonus. So I rang them and just said, right, I'm coming down right now, take it off the shelf, I'm going to walk out with it. So I bought this, which is my main bass now for all our standard tube stuff. The more modern Thunderbirds are actually really light. They're not as heavy as the old, nearly said that. They're not as heavy as the old ones, and they don't neck dive as badly because the bodies are actually quite thin. They're really straightforward control-wise. Anyone that's played a Thunderbird will know. You've got your 3 controls. You've got volume for the neck pickup, volume for the bridge pickup, and then a tone that controls the whole thing for all of them. So what we'll do, let's plug this in, get it making some noise, and I'll sort of talk you through. You can see this is properly not had it cleaned for a while. I've got rust all over the bridge down here. The first gig I ever did with it, I fell off a table, and smashed it and took a chunk out the bottom of it. There's dinks all over the place, so I'm not kind of... Oh look, there's a mark there where I left my ring on and gouged the side out of my neck. So yeah, there's loads of little dinks and things on there that you can see I'm not really precious about. As long as it works, I'm not really bothered about how it looks. So I really love the sound of these. These are the Thunder Plus pickups here, the ceramic pickups here. I will use a pick all the time now for City of Thieves. I use these, if I remember to bring them with me, I use these Dunlop Tortex, they're the blue ones. It was a bit of a balancing act between breaking strings and breaking picks. I went through a period where I broke so many picks, I'd break a pick every 3 or 4 songs. So I got heavier ones, and then I was breaking a string every 3 or 4 songs, and it was just too expensive to keep replacing strings. So I finally found a balance where I can hit hard enough where I'm not breaking either of them too regularly. And so I use these blue Dunlop Tortex. The only other thing I will not compromise on with my bass gear is I will only use Elixir bass strings now, because bass strings are expensive to replace anyway, but Elixirs, like, they're probably twice the price of standard strings, but they last about 4 or 5 times as long, with decent tone. Like you can see, I'll talk you back through the treble controls and stuff in a minute. So basically I'll always use a pick, and I tend to pick roughly around here, so just above the bridge pickup. So you can hear like all the snarl I can get. I don't have this super loud because it's a Sunday afternoon and I'm in my flat, but you can hear if I give it a tiny little nudge more. You can hear all the control, all the sound, all the attack with the pick. You can hear that there's plenty of twang on those strings as well. There's a good amount of low end, there's some distortion on there, so it snarls as well. And I'm kind of going for that sort of a bit more of a dirty than kind of a Duff McKagan type sound, and without the sort of chorus effect on it. But definitely that cut and that kind of approach, loads of octaves in there and stuff, things to just, that's just down to like the kind of bass lines and the way I'll write to cut through all the guitars and stuff like that. So that's my standard tuned, it's just E, A, D, G. We don't tune half a step down or anything like that for our standard songs. So yeah, so that's my Thunderbird Elixirs using a pick and the Marshall 450 and the Eden cap. So over here, this is my baby, this is the other one. I'll put this down. This one here is my baby. This one this is my Gibson Les Paul standard bass. I had this since I was about 15. And you can see it's absolutely demolished, annihilated. This little groove in here was when I used to play a lot more fingerstyle, and that's like my thumb groove that I dug out. That's like about 1/2 inch deep now. My thumb just sits in there perfectly. I've gone through the lacquer, gone through the wood top and just dug down, so I've got like a thumb hole there. I have just about still got my Billy Sheehan signature on the back from when I met him and had a master class with him. And then, yeah, so this one I use for, this has got a couple of mods on it which I'll go through, but this one I use for songs like Incinerator, Right to Silence, Reality Bites, and Damage. This one's in C standard. So what we did was we thought we'll make everything sound a bit heavier, we'll drop it a couple of tones. And so to deal with that, we've got heavier strung guitars, which are tuned differently, but I'll just go through the bass stuff. I'll leave the guitar stuff for Ben. What I've done here is I've taken a set of 5-string elixirs, so B, E, A, D, G, and what I did was I've chucked the G string away and used B, E, A, D. So I've got super heavy low string down here. And then what I did, because we're playing in C, not B, is I tuned everything up a semitone. So it's basically like completely standard tuning across the neck, but everything's a semitone higher. So I've got C, F, A sharp and D sharp when I tune. So that gives us like the real low end stuff. Again, I'll only buy elixirs unless I'm really in a bind, because the 5s are a lot harder to get hold of. But I will, if I can help it, I will only use elixirs, because again, they last forever. Now this bass has got standard Les Paul controls on it, so I've got a pickup selector here, up is here, middle's both, and down is the bridge. That used to be straight, but it kind of goes at an angle now. Then we have volume control for here, and tone control for here, volume control for this one, and tone control for this one. So it's a little bit more involved than the Thunderbird, but it's the same pickups, and really, the way I use it is just keep everything flat out, because especially for rock stuff, I don't think like it makes a lot of difference. I don't like just having the bridge pickup. For like jazz and things like that, when in the days when I used to be a bit more diverse, I'd use the bridge pickup a lot more for like solo sounds and things like that. And the neck pickup, if you're playing like really fat R&B stuff, then that sounds great to just put the neck pickup on and roll the tone all the way up. But for the rock stuff, I leave it in the middle, because I want a balance of the cut and the low end. And then just crank the volumes all the way up and the tones all the way up here. This does have one mod on it actually. So I have a Shaler hip shot detuner on the top, which is this little switch here. And what it does, if you flick that down, it gives you an instant tone drop. So that would now go from C to B flat. I don't use it for the C stuff because it's already low enough, but what it was for was when I used to have it in standard, it would be instant drop D with a switch, so I could just do it without arsing around retuning. So you'll hear the difference in like the pitch and stuff, I obviously straight away. So all the kind of big riffs like Incinerator. You can hear all that low end. So the sound's pretty much the same. It's probably a little bit rounder sound than the Thunderbird is, but I try and even that out by just making sure that I've got my tones cranked up all the time, and you've got both pickups on constantly, and obviously like the pitch will affect that slightly as well anyway. But yeah, so it's again all pick. I pick in roughly the same place, just behind that bridge pickup there. And I try and when I'm stood up and I have a strap and I'm stood up, I would try and have it at a length where when I hit down, that the strings are just at the extent of my arm, so that I can get maximum kind of punch into all the strings and try and hit it as hard as I can for every single note, so it's nice and even. But that's pretty much it. So that's my rig, that's my basses. There's no secret, nothing I haven't told you about how to get the sound I get, all my tone settings and everything like that. It's literally just a combination of that, this little blue pick, and whatever's in these fingers. But the thing is, like, I've given this rig to other people to play on, even give people my instruments to play on, and it just sounds completely different. So you have to try all this stuff out. This has taken years to kind of get to the point where it is now. I've tried loads of different rigs, different basses, different heads, different cabs, different styles, using my fingers, using picks, all that kind of thing. So like, to get to this point, it's taken ages. But now I feel like if I've got these two basses, this head and this cab, I can turn up anywhere in the world, plug it all in, and I will just sound like me. So yeah, stay tuned for another Gear of Thieves coming up. We've got Ben doing one, we've got Will doing one. We're going to do some studio breakdowns. We'll walk through some of the songwriting processes, how we record our demos, how we start with just a simple idea and turn it into a song. If there's anything else you want to see, leave it in the comments, like and subscribe, and we'll be back with another Gear of Thieves soon. Take it easy.